and I'm watching, and I don't see someone that looks like me. How do I know the product is going to work for me? And but it's really hard when your gut is telling you one thing, experts are telling you another. It's like I couldn't try it both ways. So I flew out to QVC a week before our airing, our one shot, and this might sound crazy to you, but I got a rental car. I sat all alone in the QVC parking lot for a week, every day, just like watching the front door of the building, knowing the next time I go in, like I'm either gonna walk out with out of business crazy. Or with, and I sat there and I prayed and I cried, and it felt really heavy. To be honest, because I didn't.
It's a big moment.
A big moment, because it was like, okay, I'm not nervous for TV, but it was like it felt like everything was on the line, and I tried to imagine who my customer was, who was watching it, like why am I doing what I'm doing, all these things.
How do you gain and keep momentum? And that is the hardest thing we've been joking about so many times. It's like sometimes technology gets in your way. Sometimes your spouses gets in the way. Sometimes, sometimes life gets in the way. Your health gets in the way. But you know what? If every day you can sense that you brought a little bit of intention to the day, and you took just a few actions towards the things that matter the most to you, and you realigned with the best and the highest, truest, strongest part of you, even just for a minute, an hour, you took a breath, you're good to the kids, you have good intentions, you're working hard. I can tell you each day can be fulfilling. And if we're going to have momentum towards something, let's have it towards a fulfilling life. What do you think, Jamie?
I think it's so good. And I think a lot of times, people tend to feel like, oh, I fell off of I fell off the track and I got off track and whatever. And it's like an all or nothing thing, right? And sometimes when you've lost momentum, it can feel like it's easier just to stay not on track, right? And it can feel heavier or harder or more difficult or more challenging to get back on track with your own momentum. And I think what's been so powerful about this week is this idea of, oh, it's okay. You give yourself grace if you feel like you've lost momentum.
Yes.
But taking that one step, right? Like taking that little thing and could you talk to Brendan about just the power of how momentum builds and also I was thinking about this morning when I was out doing my walk. Just this idea, because you talk a lot about summoning joy, and you know what I mean? Can you summon momentum? And I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, most people are summoning momentum every day, but it's unconscious, and the momentum might not be in the direction they really want to go in. Right? Every day we are summoning something, whether we will acknowledge it and take responsibility for it or not.
Yeah.
Our routine patterns, behaviors, thoughts, efforts, they're leading to something, and they're probably leading to exactly how you're experiencing life now. Like our life now is not a culmination of how the week is going. It's what were those decades of intention you've had? What were those decades of showing up when no one saw you showing up, right? Like our life, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you now get to go, oh, it's decades. When you're in your 40s and 50s, it's decades of a pattern, of a rhythm. Denise and I were talking about momentum this morning and how to get it, like positive momentum. And a couple ideas I'll throw by you. One, she said the importance of momentum is a result of a routine. Like you need, we always talk about it. You have to have scheduled time. You have to do it. She said, you just have to, it has to be a routine. So that's just what you do. First, set a routine. And the best way to set up routines, guys, when people struggle with that, is called anchored habits, which is if you want momentum in your life, anchor a new routine or habit on something you already always do. So let's say you want to have a healthier lifestyle, and every morning you tend to walk or drive your kids to school. Okay, well, that's something you already do, walk or drive kids to school. Then what you do is go, right after that, go to gym or come home and work out on YouTube. Like, it's like you're already doing whatever you are already doing, anchor before or after that, your new habit you're trying to create. And now it's just something you do. It's something you're gliding it in there. So that's establishing routine. Denise also talked about the importance of making sure that you integrate or have identity with the wins and the progress. But the favorite thing she said this morning, and I'll stop, favorite thing she said was she always had special projects. And I thought that was so mind-blowing, almost profound. It's like, if you want momentum in your life, sometimes you're just doing the grind, you're doing something every day. It is routine, it is rhythm, but you got to have something. There's always a special project that you're working on that you feel like it's your little secret skunk works project, and you're tinkering and you're working towards it, or it's a special project you're doing to get better on the side that's going to help the main thing. But it's like special projects. I always think of like, oh, I'm always working on a special project, so I feel momentum in my life, even if this thing, like running my big online business, that's just something I do every day. But so I have this special project of writing a book. And now it's like, oh, I'm that special project has momentum. I feel great about life, even if the big thing isn't going as fast as I want.
That's so powerful, because sometimes we think the momentum we need to feel is in like the day-to-day job or in the thing.
The main
and
thing.
if we're, yeah, but it's like, oh, that's a whole nother way, not only to bring joy. I love what Denise said, but like having a special project and maybe your momentum is there, right? You know, one thought too that comes to mind is a lot of people say, well, I want to try to feel more gratitude in the day. And you know, there's I'm trying to remember who shared this a long time ago, and I thought it was so good. And I started doing this in my life, just that even every morning, the second you wake up and before you put your feet on the ground, just saying thank you, whether it's to God or thank you. Wow, I'm alive today. Like I feel the air like entering my lungs today. I'm opening my eyes and I see the ceiling or the colors around me in the room or whatever it is, right? And just literally, if that becomes a daily habit, you start building momentum of gratitude in your life, right? And it's so simple, because a lot of people are like, oh, I try to meditate and it's like, I can't, and then they stop, and all the things they're trying to implement in their life. But sometimes just the simple things, because one of the things you and Denise talked about that's so good is attaching something to something you already do, right? So in the morning, we already wake up and maybe it's like hitting your alarm or whatever you do, but maybe it's before you put your feet on the ground, just like taking a second and saying, thank you, God, I'm alive, you know, thank you,
Wayne taught
universe.
me that. Wayne Dyer
Wayne
taught me that.
did. Okay.
Yeah,
So
his whole
good.
thing was he turns out of bed, he puts both feet on the ground, closes his eyes, just really centers and says, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. He says it 3 times. Like that's his rhythm. And I just love that. And
do you do that? Do you do that as a practice?
I do that. I wouldn't say as a good practice. I miss it. I would say I miss it 60% of the time. So I miss it a lot. But the good news is I've got so many other gratitude practices. Denise and I walk and we walk. I try to make sure the first few things I talk about is something I'm appreciating or grateful for. It's been something I've been working on in my own life. The high performance planner that I use forces it every day. I don't have a choice. It's like, that's one of my routines. I do that. The planner gives me the momentum. It gives me that mindset. So I fill out the high performance planner every morning, and it's essential, because I'm kind of Denise will tell you, I'm a hot mess without some routine in the morning to get me going. So I'm not, a lot of people can start the day and they are just on fire and they are good to go and they are super smart and focused. I am not that. I need a morning routine to lock in my mindset, to lock in my intention, to know what the heck I'm supposed to do today, to just get going, you know. So whether that's a workout, movement, green tea, coffee, whatever's going to be that day, I just need a little bit. I'm not one of those get up and go guys.
What I love so much about you sharing this, I just have to call this out, because so many people, millions and millions and millions of people now, millions and millions and millions of people now know you for your whole library of New York Times bestsellers and for all your high performance research and habits and planner and all the things. And, you know, they know that Oprah and her whole team, there's so many people go to you to live their best life, for a better life, to perform at the highest levels. And I think what's so cool about this Growth Day morning show is you are also sharing like the real stuff, in the sense of the impact those things have on your life, but that you are also, just like so many of us, where to share that you're a hot mess in the morning. If you didn't have these, this is really powerful, because sometimes people, like, you guys, let me know in the comments if you can relate to this. Sometimes, and even with the launch of my book, Believe It, now that I'm reading so many people's stories and everything, I realize that, oh my gosh, so many people think like momentum and motivation are things that happen to other people, or they're just kind of that way. or they're just born that way, or they're, you know, that kind of thing. And I love so much, like the day that you the day that you had the blender with your smoothie and you're talking about how you almost missed the show, all the things, right?
I almost miss the show every day. I'm sorry to interrupt. Listen to this, y'all. This show started at 7:30 a.m. Pacific today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm in Pacific time.
I was out of the shower at 7:14. 7:14. Came to the computer, checked a bunch of stuff to see what's going on with Facebook because they're not letting us stream in there. Jerks. I don't know what's happening. And so I'm working on that, troubleshooting that. And I got the link to Jamie to start the show at 7:27 a.m. So 3 minutes before. So yeah. I feel like that's kind of my life recently. And that's just been real.
We talk about momentum, right? We're talking, this week's theme is momentum, talking about one, you know, even how do you get momentum? I love what Denise said, which is having a special project. Because listen, there's a lot of people in a job right now and they're frustrated and their boss sucks and all these things. And they're like, how do I feel momentum? I got to keep this job right now. I got to put food on the table. I got to keep my paycheck. Well, maybe it's a special project that is meaningful to you, that you then you feel and generate that momentum again in your life. That really, because when we are moving forward, we feel more fulfilled, right? Maybe it's hopping on here with us and the Growth Day morning show every day. And that's the one thing where you're like, oh, you know, you start to feel momentum in just your own mindset and your ability to feel the day again. We talk a lot about feeling the day on this morning show, because I didn't feel the day for 10 years when I was just living in burnout. And, you know, I think that maybe this morning show is part of your momentum. But I love the theme this week on momentum. I think that's so powerful. And we're not letting Facebook stop us from our momentum either. We're going. If
you guys haven't seen it, we do post the replays on community.growthday.com. So at community.growthday.com, which you guys can all join free, that community website we have. And there's a little thing that just says morning show on the tab. And you can see, you know, I don't know, 10 of the best of morning shows we post. Here's my favorite thing that my wife taught me today. Denise said that she came running in as I was like dealing with the Facebook people. And she's like, oh yeah, one more. And her idea was also that don't let others define what momentum means in your life.
Ah, so good. Yeah.
And or success, or, you know, what's good and bad, or what you value is like listen, sometimes momentum for people, it literally is, they got out of bed today, they got showered, and they made themselves something to eat at some point during the day. We all been in that place where we're just down, depressed, sad, frustrated, unwell. You know, that sometimes that's the win for that day. And everyone else will be like, you didn't do anything. That sometimes just the survival and self-care is the win. Other times, depending on what your expectations are, what your projects, your intentions, what your aim or your purpose is, other times, wow, you did, you know, on average, like Jamie and I, we've been doing, you know, I always do like 7-8 hours of video and production every single day for, I don't know, 15 years, you know, it's like a lot. And then you add on all the work and everything else, like we're crushing it because we're in a launch window. Jamie's been in a launch window. Jamie did her first ever live event. She's launched the book, Believe It, which I hope you have supported. And she's never done either of those things before. So she had, you know, this is after building a huge business. And now it's like, these have been special projects for her in so many ways, and her mission, her purpose. And if you looked at what she's done in the last 6 months, you'd be like, that's impossible. That's impossible. But you don't have to compare yourself to her or to me or your Uncle Fred or Aunt Jemima. You don't have to compare yourself to nobody. It is, what is it for you? And are you showing up as your best self? Are you each day gaining more momentum towards building the lifestyle or the dream or the character, the personhood of who you want to be? Real momentum is ultimately growing more into the fullness of ourselves, growing more into the beauty and the full potential that God has gifted us. That's real momentum, but you don't always have days like that. Some days, Wednesday sucks, you know, and Wednesday just sucked. Don't be mad at yourself on Thursday and now get worse momentum on Thursday because you're measuring yourself based on unrealistic expectations of yourself or other people.
Brendan, when we feel like, oh, all of a sudden, like to your point, we had a bad Wednesday, right? And then boom, it's easy to have negative momentum. What do you do when you are all of a sudden aware that you are having negative momentum? Like in all the coaching that you've done over the years, I'm sure this has come up a lot. And how do you stop that and reverse it?
Yeah. First, you realize you got to own that. You got to own that that negative momentum often comes from your negative thinking. And your negative thinking is, why is this happening? What's wrong with these people? Why am I so dumb? And we start negative self-talk. It all begins with self-talk.
Yeah.
So we have to, first and foremost, let's observe and be mindful of what is our self-talk right now. And I teach this concept called RWID, relative weight of importance and duration, which is how much weight and importance do we give this, like these thoughts that are hurting us or negative? And if you want to turn it around, you got to start a new, more affirmative, like affirmation-based self-talk, which is honoring of yourself, which is honoring of what you're trying to do, which is honoring of life and God and spirit and purpose. It's realigning with honoring life versus dishonoring self.
Mm.
And so what happens, you lose momentum because you beat yourself up. How do you beat yourself up? You say crap to yourself. When you say crap to yourself, now you want to eat crap. Now you want to lay around and do crap. Like you're just like, everything falls apart from what's up here. Everything comes back up to here. You can never forget, every negative thing happening is ultimately coming from, I'm not talking about the external one, I'm talking about what we generate.
Right.
It is coming from what we are speaking to ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves, the excuses we tell ourselves, the way that we speak to ourselves is setting our real intention and inspiration, motivation, direction for the day. This is why in Growth Day, and what I'm telling everybody, please pay attention to, your primary thing that you must do in your personal development is you must consume and pay for and invest in great personal development. And the reason I say that isn't, I don't care if it's mine. I don't care if it's Growth Day or something else. You need something going into your brain, whether it's podcasts, which can be free, or people's online courses, or you're reading a book, because that's also going in your brain. You need this positivity and this purposeful conversation going in your head, because the more you wire that into your brain, the more your brain is set up on that frequency, so that when the lower frequencies of self-doubt, self-harm, upset come in, your brain goes, oh, no, hey, that's a weird station. That station should be come in. We're on this station. And so you got to wire that into your brain. This is why personal development is so critical. And for those of you who I call it like self-help apologists who are like, I don't really like self-help, but I do. And because they think it makes them a dork. You're a dork. Welcome to our community. We do this. This is why this woman became $1 billion business builder. This is why I've probably, nearing 1 billion video views of all of our training and our courses, and certainly, the impact and impressions we've been able to make with personal development, because people know you cannot get momentum and you can't be your best self without a dedication to self-awareness and self-mastery. Without a personal development edge, you will always be mediocre, because you'll just settle into the comfort zone. There has to be that conversation in your head saying, you got greatness in you. You can do this. Remember what you're capable of. Try hard, show up, believe in yourself. You got this. Jamie's book, Believe It. Like, you need those things like grooving into your brain if you're ever gonna have breakthroughs.
So good. So many people in the comments saying, thank you guys for talking about the negative momentum, right? Because, so often it's like, we're like, here, the positive, all this stuff, but then that's so real for so many people. When you have that negative momentum, what do you do? And something you just said that was so powerful about honoring life instead of dishonoring yourself.
Yes.
Like, can you just share? Where's the mic to drop? Because that's like literally, though, that's so powerful, and how it all starts in our mind. Are we honoring life, or are we dishonoring ourselves? And how when you think crap, you eat crap. I can relate to that one. All those things, especially in the past few weeks, all those things. But that's huge. Will you just, Brendan, if you can, because a lot of people are in that space of feeling a little bit negative momentum, and especially after the past 14 months. But the idea of turning it around by honoring life instead of dishonoring yourself, that's huge.
Yeah, it comes from me. From me, I'm a person of faith. I believe in God deeply, and I am somebody who I just have this belief that having reverence for life is the real secret. And I have reverence for life because multiple times I've faced my death, but I've also been with people in hospice as they've died. And I think if you have the opportunity to be around the difficulties of life, you appreciate them more. And if you have the benefit of having a blessing or a connection with God, creator, universe, a source, whatever you want to call it, wherever your faith or tradition is or isn't, I think what's powerful is for me, I know this is for me, I won't dishonor life by speaking ill of God's creation. I believe that you're a gift of God. I believe that people are. I believe that people get in tough spots and do irresponsible things, and some people are not well. I believe that explains a lot of the challenges and the issues and the evils that we see in the world. But I also believe that there's some higher plan. I believe that there is something that is very special, that we are alive on the spinning globe in this unfathomably huge cosmos and universe that is constantly expanding, that we don't even understand how it's happening. I think it's a very precious and beautiful thing. And I believe that falls down to unit economics, which means it applies to you, which means if you believe the universe is special, then you have to believe you are. If you believe that God created good things, then you have to believe that you are good. You have to believe that if there's blessings in this world, then you yourself are a blessing, because everything is one. And so I just believe to speak ill of myself that's not just self-harm. And we know, listen, any psychologist or therapist tell you having negative self-talk is going to derail your life. It's going to ruin your relationships, ruin your health, ruin your wealth. It's terrible, right? We all know that. But also we should know that, it's very dishonoring of life and the impossibility that you're alive. It's very dishonoring of your God or your faith or your universe, whatever you believe it to be. And I just won't do it. I won't do it. I'm like, who am I to disparage the fact that God gave me this mind and body? Like, really? I just don't have enough ego to bash myself. And so I feel like when you're aligned with something that's higher than you, you honor you.
It's so good. I think a lot of people, even people with strong faith, don't make that connection necessarily as it pertains to themselves, right? I was in a discussion with a bunch of women on Instagram about body image and about the idea of loving your body versus shaming yourself for your body. And, one of the things I talked about was similar to what you just said, actually. I was saying, one thing I try to think about a lot is like, if you can't cheer for yourself, cheer for God's creation, which is you.
Yeah.
Which is you, and shifting that mindset around it.
This week's message was momentum. And it's so funny. Jamie and I had tech issues all week. One of my tech leads in my company, his Mac Pro blew up 24 hours ago also, Jamie. And then, you know what? On top of it, here's the thing about momentum. If you're an entrepreneur, shout out. If you're an entrepreneur, make sure you give us double hand clap down below so we can see it, because that's how we started. And and let me share you this quick story with you. When you're Jamie, Denise and I were talking about this briefly in the kitchen this morning. It's like, when you're an entrepreneur, like I was talking with Facebook, they're like, oh, just send us to your CTO. I'm like, I am the tech department. Or you work with other people, like, send it to your HR. I'm like, I am HR. Or give it to your marketing person. I am. Like, you wear every single hat when you are building your dream. Like, there is a component. You have to be a Swiss Army knife. Like, I am the lawyer. I am the HR. I am the digital marketer. I am, that's just a reality at some parts of your business career. Do you remember those days?
I remember those days so well. I remember that. And I even remember some of our first partnerships or all the things. And they are like, can you have your legal team review? And I'm thinking to myself,
A, I have no legal team, and B, I can't afford one, even if I you're like, absolutely, we'll circle back with legal edits right away.
We'll get right back to you. And you remember you were replying to people as if you were like an assistant and like a make-believe human.
So Brendan, early, yeah, a lot of the early years, it was like when you just got to figure everything out. Like you called it, right? A Swiss Army knife. And it's so funny because, we grew IT Cosmetics to over 1,000 employees across the country. And when I think back though to the first several years, when you can't afford to hire anyone else, you just figure it out the best you can. For me, my other strategy was praying a lot. Like I don't know what to do. And then I was like, oh, this isn't working when I email myself to like Good Morning America, like, hi, I'm available for an So then I was like, at one point, my middle name is Marie. And so Marie got her own email address. It was marie@itcosmetics.com. So she became head of PR. She became head of customer service. So it was like, yeah. And so Marie would pitch like
and Marie was you.
Yes. Yes.
So you were using like a alias, I think they call it. Like
it was like I was trying to. So I would email and say like Good Morning America or Today Show, all of them, and I would be like, "Great news! Our founder, Kern Lima, is available for an interview." And it was just like, I don't know, you got to do what you got to do in the beginning. But I think these stories are important because sometimes when we're in those seasons and they can be multi-year. For me, it was a years of this. Someone can go on your company Facebook or your Instagram or whatever, and everything looks like you got it together. And then you're behind the scenes, and Marie is hustling just as much as Jamie. And actually, Jackie, our very first full-time employee, we hired her when she was 6 months pregnant. She's a friend of mine now of 20 plus years that I was mentioning the other day. She actually also did this. I should have talked about this part and believe it.
Oh, so many entrepreneurs do this. Absolutely.
Yeah, her middle name is Anne. So at IT Cosmetics at one point, we had Jamie and Marie and Paula, and we had Jackie, and we had Anne. Anne had her own email address too, because we were just trying to entrepreneur life.
Listen, I think this is so important about momentum that we didn't really get to real deep this week in terms of when you are trying to gain a lot of momentum, you got to deal with the overwhelm of wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And not be upset about it, not bemoan it, not get angry about it. Like last night, I was up till 2 a.m. reviewing legal stuff and just contracts and things of some deals we have going on. And I'm like, wow, this is just, I can't believe I still got to do this. And then I heard my mind say that. I still have to do this. I was like, you little brat, get the damn work done. Like what a lucky opportunity that you're doing deals like this. Get through the paperwork. And I do that same thing. It's like, I got to shoot another video. It's going to impact millions of people one day. Yeah. Turn the damn light on. Get to it, kid. Like I hear myself talk and I get overwhelmed because it's hard or it's too many things. Even this morning, I had a huge, we're about to launch the Growth Day app next month, April 15th. We finally launched the app. It's going to be so huge, right? So we already have, thousands of people in Growth Day. But then when we open up the tools to the public, it's going to be insane. But to do that, like this morning, I'm doing all these API things and these credential things and these callback things and all this authorization stuff. And I'm just, my eyes are like, and I went out to get my Growth Day mug this morning, right before the show. And I just said to Denise, I'm like, I think I just broke my brain. I think it just broke. That was like, stuff I don't even, it was so hard. I think my brain just broke. And that's entrepreneurialism, but that's chasing your dream. You guys want a promotion at work? It's going to break your brain. It's going to be so hard to learn all these new things, right? You want to try this new project or attempt something new or take on a new level of skill set or responsibility. Don't bemoan the overwhelm. Don't be like, oh, this is part of it. This is the stretch. This is what's going to make me so capable in so many areas. Like you drop me in any country in the world, in the world. I know I can run the route of hard work, of discipline, of persistence, of real desire, of the ability to emotionally regulate myself to deal with whatever, and I can build it again. I know that anywhere. I like, put me in, I'll build another one. Like, it has no problem, because it's not the perfect strategy that gets you ahead. It's how do you cope with the struggle? I'll say it again. It's not the perfect strategy that gets you ahead. It's how do you cope with the struggle? Everyone's got the same strategy. You can buy the strategies, you can learn the strategies, but how do you deal with the overwhelm of it all? And again, I'll come back to what we talked about this week. Either your mindset is towards momentum or it's towards ego protection. And if you can adopt that learning mindset, like, oh, it's going to be hard. It's going to break my brain. But when it broke my brain, I wasn't complaining. I don't want to ever do this again. I'm going to stop. I didn't decide to take the day off. I was like, damn, this is hard, man. Cool. Let's keep going.
One line that I have found, one saying, one message I found that for me, single biggest game changer for momentum shifts is this idea that I don't have to, I get to. Right.
Yes.
And it's kind of that same thing. And this for me is even in my morning walks. It's in the day when I'm doing stuff for the book that I don't want to do, or all the back end stuff, right? When we put on this huge event, which was literally the most incredible, one of the most incredible days I've ever had. And
you were so in flow. Jamie killed it. If you all were unstoppable, make sure you let her know in the comments. She just absolutely slayed that live online event. Slayed it. I watched her behind the scenes and she was just like,
and like, the thing is, I loved every second of it. You know what I mean? And we were 11 and a half hours live in that studio, and I loved it. And with an event with that magnitude, with 18 speakers and 200,000+ people signed up for it, with an event that size and all the teams that go into it, behind the scenes, and even right now, even today, which is like 2 weeks later, there's still stuff. There's still glitches that happened, or one prize winner, they didn't get their address, or like all the things. And I'm still every day. I cannot even keep up right now with the amount of the things I don't want to do. And so I'll lose my joy if I don't flip it around and say, oh, I don't have to do this. I get to do this. I get to try to figure out this prize winner's address that we still can't figure out, because all the things, right? But even also from work stuff just to life stuff, I really have to say that to myself a lot. Like in the mornings when I don't want to be up at 5 a.m. and I want to just like curl up with coffee and one of those love blankets and all the stuff, I'm like, okay, I've got to move my body, and I don't want to, but I get to. And I have to flip it so that I propel forward with momentum in my morning walk. I think that thought, I don't have to, I get to, every single morning. And then I'm like, oh, wow. And my focus shifts to something that actually propels momentum. I shift to like, wow, how blessed am I? I can move I can take a step.
Yes.
And another step. Like, I get to, not everyone gets to, right? And I have to shift it that way. So for me, I don't have to, I get to. I think about that a lot, especially the stuff I don't want to do, especially the stuff that breaks your brain, as you would say.
Breaks your brain. And, being in the high performance world for so long, I get to work with a lot of unbelievable military leaders. I mean, multi-star generals, people who have some of the most difficult responsibilities in the military, and really aspirational leaders, just incredible people. And that phrase that they so often use at the top and now is more perpetuated in the common marketplace is, embrace the suck. And if you're going through something and it's not like, oh, I get to do this, it sucks. Yeah. That's okay. That's where it's like, okay, this does suck. Let's acknowledge it. Don't want to do it. It's okay that you don't want to do things. That's what I'm always telling people too. It's like, there's some things I don't want to do, but it's not a preference. The question is it required? Is it required for you to move the ball forward? Is it required for you to grow? Is it required for you to go to another level? Is it necessary? And if it is, you can say this sucks. I don't want to do it. I hate it. I'm fine with all that, but you better get on with it. And in the military, they say embrace the suck. It's like, okay, this does suck. Embrace it. Got to work through it. In my language, I say honor the struggle, or I say bring the joy. It's like, okay, this morning, the average human would have been so discouraged, frustrated. Brendan, 20 years ago, would probably put his fist through the damn monitor. I've been like, I hate this. Now I'm like, yep, this sucks. Dang, this is hard. All right, let's get on with it. And it's not going to ruin the rest of my day. And I want you to all hear that, because as we head into Friday, I think there's two mindsets into a Friday. One is you are ramping down, powering down, and you're kind of limping along, inching along, and just going through the motions just to finish the Friday and be done. That's the underperformer. The high performer goes, Friday finishers. What are the major activities I need to put a bow on? I need to complete by the end of this day to end this week well and to set myself up well for next week. It's just a completely different mentality. They might have the exact same responsibilities, job, payments, kids, like the whole thing, same thing. But one mindset is just like, good. And the other one goes, all right, yeah, this kind of sucked. It was a long week. So let me finish it strong, right? Either the week sucked and you whimper to a close, or the week sucked and you finish it strong. That mindset, that's the winning mindset. I just believe it's true. And it's so key to what we talk about in Growth Day, because there's just a different level of striving ambition that challenges yourself, even when, momentum is hard. You still got to show up.
Yeah, that's so good. And I love too that when you honor the struggle or embrace the suck or bring the joy, it literally impacts every single area of your life, not just like your goals for the week. Like it's every part of your life. You know what I mean? It's on a Sunday morning when the Keurig machine explodes and your kids are like, I can handle it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like every part of your life.
Yes. I am obsessed with an idea that you have in the book about how all the hard things are going to, like we started with that quote, they're either going to break you or they're going to make you. And really that's up to you. And the stories you share in the book are really, they draw you in with they are both entertaining because they're well written and well told. They're gut wrenching at times because I can imagine what it would be like to go through that. But they act ultimately as a yellow brick road in a way that I found very enticing in your book. And one of the bricks on the yellow brick road was that your father was an alcoholic. And you said something in the book that I was really impacted by, given my wife, Lisa, and what she's like. You said, my dad loved me, and he was a kind and gentle man who quietly struggled with alcoholism. And the way that you described that was very generous. And you said, but there were times that you would sit and stare at the clock, and because you had to wait for him to wake up, which your mom would be off working. And so sometimes it could be hours of waiting for him to wake up, and he would wake up, or you would get to the time where you were allowed to wake him up, and then he would ask you for an hour or two. And then I just imagine you sitting there watching the clock flip until he finally gets up and you guys can hang out. And in that you said, my dad inadvertently taught me that women are superheroes that have to be stronger than men, because that's what my mom was, a superhero who's essentially doing everything by herself. And I was like, I know that it is, Jamie, I don't wish difficulties on anybody. But man, when they're looked at from the right lens, they make pretty extraordinary people. So that's a story you tell early in the book. The yellow brick road then leads to a photo of you and 7 of your friends, so you and 6 other people. And you break down. Every one of you guys has overcome. It's almost absurd. The fact that out of 7, 2 of you were adopted. There's breast cancer. There's learning difficulty. I mean, it was crazy. And yet, each and every one of them is absurdly successful. How do people harness difficulties like that to become something powerful instead of, leaning into the victim side, which anybody would understand, people pulling the victim card from that? But how do you pull something else?
the very first and most important thing on how is you have to want to. And I think that every human being can easily go into victim mentality on a lot of things that have happened in all of our lives, right? And it's a mentality that actually can, I think, reward you in a lot of ways, and also become a justification too for staying inside your comfort zone when it comes to things like going after your dreams. And it makes sense for a lot of people, right? And again, I think there's a time. I mean, I'm not going to speak to people that, I'm not going to speak to a lot of the really hard things that require a lifetime of work to figure out. What I will say is therapy is the best thing I've ever done in really understanding this. And I actually talk about that.
Does it allow you to recontextualize? Is that the idea?
Yeah, and to understand it at a deep level. And by the way, your show, like this conversation, to me, these are the things that are so important that we invest in ourselves and do, right? Because I mean, I don't want to stay in a place where it could be easy to stay at in my life. I think that the quote you started out with, like, when these tough times happen, do you warrior up or do you victim up? Do you level up or do you give up, right? The up is up to you. And I do believe why I share the story of my 7 closest friends is because I think this is important. I think a lot of people out there are like me and maybe have loving family, loving friends. But if you were to turn the volume up on all of them and they were to be your only inner circle, it'd be really easy for self-doubt to take over. It'd be really easy to dim your own light. And I talk about my journey of how I chose my circle around me. And it's never based on a commonality of life experience. It's my closest friends. And I think this is important for everyone listening, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have an inner circle that empowers me. How do I find one? I would say Impact Theory and Impact Theory University, that alone can be a part of your inner circle. That's a voice and conversations and information that you want to turn the volume up on. And I talk about this because I think this is universal for everyone and so important to do this. A lot of times people build their circle of friends based on who they went to school with or things they have in common and all the stuff, right? Maybe it's a group of people from work because you're around them all the time, whatever it is. And I think that that's not always the right thing. I think who your circle is so important. And for me, I go deep on this in the book and talk about each one of their stories because I want to drive the point home that who you do surround yourself with, and when you judge them by their heart and how they pour into you and champion you and don't tell you this crap you just because you want to hear it, they tell you the real truth, which is so important. They don't get jealous when you're flying high. They want you to fly higher. I talk about this commonality of traits, and yet my closest group of friends have literally almost nothing in common. Their backgrounds are so different. They have different faiths and no faith. They one of them was homeless all growing up, then lived in the projects, and then figured out how to build her own circle and become an entrepreneur. And she figured out how to turn down the volume of negativity and lack of dreaming of all the people around her, for the most part, that she was raised in. And how did she turn that volume up on her own, like, inner light? And I share this common thread, really just to inspire a mindset shift sometimes of, oh, you know what? My circle of friends, each person listening right now, my circle of friends, they don't need to think like I do or pray like I do or love like I do or anything else. But like, if I surround myself with people that are truly telling the truth, loving me authentically and uplifting and dreaming big with me, and calling me out on the BS when I start to like talk myself out of my own truth, right? Which we all do. It's a lifelong journey. Talk about the power of finding people like that and surrounding yourself with them. And I think they can be people in real life. And I also think that they can be people that you let pour into you who maybe you've never even met, like you, like your show for people. You know what I mean? I think that that's really powerful. Who we let speak into our lives and who we turn the volume down on, but still love anyway, is so important. Because one of our biggest mistakes is turning the volume up on the people just because we love them and they're our family. And then all of a sudden, that's all the noise we hear, and it impacts our whole life.
Talk to me about the ability to turn the volume up and down. That was one of the things I found really extraordinary in your book. Like, if I were going to do like a spoof of your book, it would go something like this. Somebody was really fucking mean. I cried like a motherfucker. And then I walked in the next room like a warrior. Like, it's that over and over and over. I love that. Like, every time. Well, I mean, you actually have a whole chapter in the book about swinging your big balls, which we should definitely talk about. But first, give me the idea. How do you turn the volume down? When you said that earlier about the guy who said, look, people aren't going to buy makeup from somebody that looks like you. How do we grab the volume knob on something that gnarly?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a disciplined practice. It's such a skill. It's hard. I mean, just yesterday, I had someone do something that I thought was like a super close friend, and I was just blindsided, and I felt so betrayed. And listen, we all go through these things, and they're hard. And one of my friends many years ago, Bob Goff is his name, he taught me this, and it just stuck. I just feel like it was so important to talk about it because this tool that Bob had taught me, where he talked about your own microphone and then the volume dial. And he basically, I imagine, right, because, you know, that I have this microphone. Everyone listening right now, imagine you have your own microphone, and you have to get into really good practice of like who you hand your microphone to and let speak into it. And what I had to learn, one example of this is, you know, my dad, who was an alcoholic, who was a good man with a really bad addiction, and loved me the best way he knew how with his own capacity. And I remember I was, you know, working, I was always super ambitious. I wanted to get a car and go travel, all the things. So I had 4 jobs in high school. And, you know, I was working, one of my jobs, I was working in a health club. And I started as a receptionist. And then they said, well, if you sell memberships, you'll make commission on those too. And I started selling a lot of memberships. And I was like, this is great. And so after high school, I didn't go to school right away. I moved out, got my own apartment. I was making like $55,000 a year, which was more than my dad at his job he'd been at. And I never forget when I made this decision I was going to go to school. I was like, okay, because I just wanted to get out, meet other people, and like figure stuff out. And I remember when I told him I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go to school, and he was mortified. He's like, what are you doing? Like, do you know how much money you're making right now? I mean, he was so upset and so worried about me that I was making a huge mistake. And so I remember even in that moment, you know, we all have experiences like that in our lives with our family, right? They're seeing things through their own lens of experience. But whether it's a story like that, or it's just a friend that you love hanging out with and you go to the gym with only, but anytime you share a hope and dream, all of a sudden you feel them lower your vibration. Like you feel it, right? Because they don't get it, or they don't like it, or whatever it is. Bob Goff taught me this, that basically you learn, oh, I'm going to take back my microphone from them on those topics, right? I'm going to talk to them about my workout today, or in my dad's case, you know, what's happening on the news or whatever. But I started learning with my own big hopes and dreams. I don't give other people my microphone who are then just going to literally lower my vibration because of their own lens of limitation. And it's the skill you develop. And when you imagine holding your own microphone, listen, we all, you know, if you are blessed to have a family or friends that you love, it's not like, you know, you want to just X them out of your life because they don't understand your hopes and dreams. But learning to just not share them all with them, hold your own microphone, talk to them about other things. Like what's on The Bachelor, or like what's going on with whatever, right? And love them, but put those boundaries in place. And then the other thing is the volume dial, and that's big. And, you know, people have said things to us that have hurt us, probably universally. There's probably not a single person out there that hasn't had someone say something to them that hurts them deeply. And it is human nature to relive it over and over and over and over in our own head, to the point where we carve a groove and it's like it starts to stick and take root. And I think it is so important mentally for me. Like every time that dude who said no one will buy makeup from you, and there were so many other rejections that I talk about in the book. You know, when I went to Sephora and felt like I didn't belong and I didn't fit in and all those things, you know, a lot of times the most hurtful words we hear are the ones we say to ourselves, and the ones we make up, and telling ourselves we're not enough and all that kind of stuff. And I have to be mindful and intentional and literally imagine myself when those thoughts come up, stopping them, turning down the volume, and then turning up the volume on something else until I believe it.
Everyone listen so closely to this woman who sold her company for $1 billion plus. So here we go. Take us to the moment.
So yeah, one of the biggest lessons in my whole life came down to this moment where we finally got a shot on QVC, right? And so, you know, we had heard no from them for a couple years, and even Ed, I got their head guy, named Alan Burke, who built this $1 billion division in QVC of beauty, and he's a legend, like an icon. After 2 years of no's from them, I finally got him on the phone. And I thought, oh my gosh, if he's giving me a few seconds of his time, like this is good. Like it's going to be a yes finally. And I'll never forget, on the phone, he says to me, you know, we've reviewed your products with our whole buying team and it's unanimous. You're not the right fit for QVC or for our customers. And so instantly I go into like, oh, but I am the right fit. Let me tell you why. And I start pitching my heart out. Right. And he thanked me for loving QVC, and it was a no. So that was like one of the most memorable nights, because I don't know if you've ever had, bad news in business or something like that. And you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, fuck, like you hoped it was a dream.
Yes.
and it wasn't, right? It was like that for 3 days in a row. I just knew in my gut we're supposed to be on QVC. And it's so, and I knew for years, because I thought, Ed, oh my gosh, I can go live. And unlike all those ads I've seen my whole life that I don't even know if they're real, like, let me show real women, like my mom and my friends and let me show real women. And I believed it. And yet everyone kept telling me no. And finally to get Alan Burke on the phone and hear, literally, I'm not the right fit. When you hear those words, it sucks, right? And by the way, like anyone who's ever been told they're not enough and is tempted to believe it is why I wrote this book. Because there's a lot of people that work really, really hard. And there's a lot of people that still don't quit. They keep going. But like making that decision to believe that you can and that your dream's possible, for me, that's huge. And I just like made the decision to believe it. And and every time I got rejected, whether it was from Alan Burke at QVC or any of the retailers for year after year after year, like I would still approach them as if it was gonna be a yes, and send them sales updates and send them product launches. And they're like, who the F is, and I'd keep I just made that decision. So 3 years into this, we finally got this yes on QVC. And what happened with this yes and this one shot is literally one of the single greatest lessons I've ever learned in life and in business. So what this meant was we had one chance to sell our product in this 10-minute window live on QVC. And, for anyone unfamiliar with QVC who might be listening, it's a live television show, and it's broadcast to 100 million homes. There's no script, no teleprompter. And what I learned, Ed, right before I went on, is that you're given 10 minutes in the case of the segment I got, but that's not a guarantee, right? If you go live and let's say a minute or two in, you're not hitting the sales goals, your clock cuts live. So you might be a minute or two in thinking you have 8 minutes left and you're not doing well, boom, you're down to 1 minute. And you can calculate in your head how much money you just lost and what that means. So we get one shot, we get a yes. And this is like huge, right? Because I knew in my gut, like this is supposed to happen. And I'm going to show real women live. I'm going to shift culture and beauty. Like I knew it. And here's what happened. We got a purchase order and I quickly learned, we were only selling 2 to 3 orders a day on our website, right? Packing them from our living room, just trying to survive, down to no money. Well, for a 10-minute window at QVC, we had to sell over 6,000 units of our concealer to hit their sales goal or not come back, and their consignment in beauty. So what it meant was, if we didn't hit those numbers, we didn't sell in that 10-minute window, everything that we didn't sell got shipped back to us and we weren't paid for it.
Oh.
So, and you know, you should never accept a purchase order you can't afford to lose.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was like, we didn't know how we're going to make it either way. So I thought, okay, this is our one shot. This is going to like be life-changing, right? So we hired these third-party consultants that are amazing, and they're experts, and they help a lot of people sell on television and in retail stores. And, you know, we worked with them on, okay, how do we produce our 10-minute window? And the craziest thing happened, right? When we know what we stand for, and we think that we're going to stand for it when it comes down to everything on the line, but then someone else tells you that that's not going to work, it's really hard not to question our own values and not to question our own intuition. These experts told me, you know, in order to succeed, here's what you need to do. You need to use this type of model. And it was the perfect flawless skin, the models I'd always seen in TV ads. And I would say to them like, well, but that's actually not why I created this brand. Like, and I would tell them, you know, imagine if you're 70 years old sitting at home and you see someone you can't even relate to that doesn't look like you. How do you know the product's going to work for you? Or, you know, I have rosacea, or 70% of people have hyperpigmentation. If they don't see someone that looks like them, and we would get into it and argue and fight, and they wanted me to win. Like, but they were literally giving me the very best advice through the lens of their own experience. And the thing that I wish I knew, so that I know now, but this would have saved me so many nights crying myself to sleep, is sometimes even experts, even the people that are touted visionaries, right? And they really are, and they would never admit this, but they still often can't imagine in their subconscious something succeeding if they haven't seen proof that it has before, right? And that would have made the rejection sting a lot less, because if you're doing anything authentically, anything that hasn't been done before, anything differently, people often can't even imagine it succeeding because of their own, right? And so all of them told me to do it. And they're like, listen, and we would fight. We got into it, and they're like, we want you to win. So I was in this moment where I flew out to QVC in Pennsylvania a week early before this one shot on live TV to either, you know, hit their sales goals or basically go out of business. And I went all alone and sat in this rental car in the QVC parking lot, because it literally felt so heavy. Like I knew what my gut was telling me to do, but in that moment, I hadn't seen any proof that it was right. No proof in the form of sales anywhere. I mean, we're doing 2 to 3 orders a day for 3 years in. No other retailer saying yes. Everyone telling me you're not this enough or that enough. But those moments in life where we still have that knowing, it's so easy to doubt it. And it's so easy to think we're wrong and to not trust it anymore. And I sat in this rental car praying and crying and literally asking God to take this from me, because it felt so heavy. I felt like everything came down to this moment. Honestly, I was tempted to go against my own gut. I was like, okay, well, maybe if I listen to what they're saying, right? Yeah, like maybe I'll do that and I'll do really well for a while, then I'll try it my way. And I just sat in that car and it didn't feel right. And I just kept praying about it. And I would imagine like who my customer was on the other end. And for some reason, I don't know why, I kept imagining this single mom in Nebraska who was like folding laundry and way too busy to remember that she mattered and that she's beautiful. And I just had this moment I'll never forget the rest of my life in that car, that rental car, where I was like, it was just like, it hit me like a ton of bricks, where I was like, you know what? I would rather go on live television. If she's going to give me 2 seconds of her precious time and look up at her TV screen, like I would rather her see me up there showing real women who look like her, calling them beautiful and meaning it, and have her buy nothing. I'd rather do that than sell a shitload of product and like stand for nothing. So I knew what I had to do, but sometimes when we know what we have to do, it doesn't mean it's easy to do it. And honestly, like I was freaking out. I was so prepared. I had this demonstration on my wrist I was going to do that shows how our product doesn't crease and the top 2 department store ones do. And I get to the live studio, I walk in, we have our 10 minutes, and I go out there on the set live with the host, and I'll never forget, Ed, the clock was like, was it 10 minutes? And it's like 9:59, 9:58, like, shit, like I'm on live, like this is happening, right? And I was trying to, and I felt literally sweat all the way dripping down everywhere. I didn't want to talk about that. I was free, and I'm not nervous for television, but everything was on the line. And I was trying to do this demonstration. I had practiced a million times in my bathroom mirror, and my hand was like this. And I was trying so hard to do it. And the host was like, thank you, sugar. And she pushed it under. And I remember the moment my bare face,
Yes,
bright red rosacea came up on national television, right? And I remember walking over to these real women and calling them beautiful and meaning it. And there was about like 1 minute left in the cell, in the 10-minute segment. And the host was like, the deep shade is almost sold out. The tan shade, we're down to 200. I was like, and then I remember literally right at the 10-minute mark, the sold out sign came up diagonal, like across the screen, and tears like start streaming down my face. And I remember my husband, Paulo, he came rushing through the double doors, and I'm like sobbing, and I'm like, real women have spoken. And he's like, we're not going bankrupt. And I was like, ah! And that one airing turned into 5 that year, 101 the next year. And then we did 250 live shows a year. So I've done over 1,000 live shows myself on QVC, and we grew the largest beauty brand in QVC's history. And it is right now at this moment, to this day. And I only share that because it was 3 years, right, of them saying no, and you're not the right fit. And no one can tell you you're not the right fit. You know what I mean? And sometimes I feel like we hear those, every one of us has heard that in some form or another, that you're not the right fit or you're not enough. And I feel like those aren't the moments where you give up. Those are the moments like you get back up, and with God and grace and grit, like you keep hustling and you keep going and you keep following your knowing. And one more little thing to share with you, just on the topic of full circle moments. Alan Burke, who's the head like legend, after we launched on QVC, right? He's the one that said no, and I was crying myself to sleep 3 nights in a row. And he told me I'm not the right fit for QVC, all that kind of stuff. After we launched on QVC, I ended up getting to know him really well. And he became not only a dear friend, but literally one of my greatest mentors in my entire career. He is right now, to this day, one of my greatest mentors. And, you know, he's the one that built that billion-dollar beauty, multi-billion-dollar empire at QVC for beauty. When he retired from QVC, we hired him in a paid position on our advisory board. So Ed, the guy that rejected me, was now working for me. Like, no one can tell you you're not the right fit, right? And so anyways,
you're amazing. You guys, listen to me on this. I went and I got to say that I love you. It's one of the great stories of all time, told by the person still living it. Why do you need to get the book? I'm not selling the book, guys. I'm just telling you. Why do you want to get the book? Why do you want to follow Jamie? Because she really did it. Do you know how rare it is in the business, entrepreneur, self-help space that it's not someone theorizing about things they think would probably work, but they've never applied? She did this. So what's in this book is gold. You don't have a lot of people on earth who have done what she's done. And then even fewer are like, let me teach you how I did it and how I think. It's very rare. And it's why today's such a gift to be doing the show with you. I have to just tell you, it's interesting because we've met a couple times in green rooms or backstage and different things. And just so you know, Jamie is so kind and has so much humility. And you can't find anyone anywhere who has a bad word to say about her. She's just a beautiful spirit. And so I knew the story a little bit. And then I knew you were going to be on the show. So I was prepping. I already know the work that went in, and I know the result, but I went and watched the clip when you showed your rosacea, right? Yeah. And I found myself, even though I know what happens, I was like, got butterflies in my stomach for you now, even though it's years later. I'm kind of saying quiet prayers for you, and I already know that you won, but it's such a poignant moment to go through all of that rejection. And I think you're giving so many people hope that you stuck to your guns about your beliefs as well.
You know what's interesting? There's a meme online of a kid of a little child learning to walk, and it says something like, when a child is learning to walk, they fall over hundreds of times, and they hit their head and they scrape their knee and they cry and these things. But at no point do they think maybe this walking thing isn't for me. They don't say, I'm just going to crawl for the next 80 years of my life and just crawl everywhere. They eventually keep getting up and they learn to walk. They balance, they hold on to something, right?
Yeah.
You've got kids, and so you've seen this firsthand. They never stop trying to walk. Why do you think we as adults stop trying to walk into our dreams or into opportunities when we hit ourselves one time, we fall one time? Why do you think we stop when as kids we never did when we were learning to walk?
I think I've never answered this question before, so I'm just going to pour it right out to you, my like how I really feel about that. I think kids have a knowing inside, an instinct. They want to walk, and they just think that they're going to figure it out. They see people around them walking, and they just do it. It's like a knowing, and nothing's telling them not to trust themselves. And I think that as we grow up, I think that everything around us starts to tell us not to trust ourselves. Like self-doubt is so huge. We get and just to use my own example, and some of the stories that I share for the first time ever in the book is like, it's like when you're in the spot of all the experts telling you they don't believe in you, or it could be other people's opinions, right, telling you they don't believe in you. It could be literally no proof of your own dream or idea that it's going to be successful, right? In those first 3 years of this journey of It Cosmetics, there was no proof. It was like no signs, right? Other than women were starting to post their own befores and afters and spread the word online, which was great.
So you were getting some sales.
Yeah, we were doing about 2 to 3 orders a day on our website.
Were you doing were you going and showing it in person at a live events? Were you doing QVC at this point?
No, not. So QVC was our big first yes, and probably the scariest. Probably the biggest life and business lesson I've ever learned. Was
when did that come? After 3 years?
Yeah, after 3 years.
So the first 3 years, were you going to grocery stores and
I tried
everything, going to the fairground,
any trade
and anything,
show, anything online. We
Farmers
couldn't afford
markets.
to advertise.
Right.
Any different beauty event. I mean, we would. My friends and family would walk into any Ulta or Sephora and be like, and they knew they didn't carry them, but they'd be like, "Can I talk to the manager? Do you carry It Cosmetics?" They're like, "It what?" They go, "Oh, It Cosmetics is so good," and they would try to hustle for us.
It's very Sarah Blakely-esque, where her friends would go and place orders and make it all sell out.
It was that. It was just trying to hustle. And the other thing is all the no's, like every time Sephora or QVC or Ulta would say no, like that was one thing, is that I didn't take it personal, right? That was one, I did a lot of things wrong. That was one thing I did right. And the second they would say no, it hurt, it sucked, obviously. But it's like, okay, I would literally, Lewis, I would decide to believe like it's going to be a yes, and I behaved accordingly. Like I would say, okay, thank you, but one day it will be a yes, and I'm so excited for when that happens. And then what I would do is every time we get like a press placement, or we would be launching a new product or whatever, I would send that buyer who kept saying no, and I'd be like, great news, we just got, in this magazine or whatever, and like one day when your customers get to try this in their store, they're gonna love it. And I think they probably thought I was crazy, but I just decided to believe.
You've got to be relentless in following up too.
Yeah.
You can't just hope that they find out about you. You've got to constantly be following up the way you did, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to look at the magazine and see it. They're not going to see your sales numbers unless you tell them over and over again.
Yeah. And I know you're big on LinkedIn and everything. I would literally scour LinkedIn for any person who worked at Sephora or Ulta or QVC.
Friend them and message them.
Everything. And then try to send them a sample. I mean, it was like everybody. It was... And we couldn't afford to hire anybody, so we got so lean and so scrappy that like in the early years, my middle name's Marie, and so Marie got her own email address. So Marie at itcosmetics.com was like head of customer service, and I would pitch all the Good Morning America. I'd be like, our founder's available for, you know what I mean? It was just like hustling and trying to figure it out. And every time I would check in with my gut, though, no matter how many times I got knocked down, like I still, even though there's no proof around me, I still kept feeling like this was what I was supposed to do. And I made the decision to trust it through those years of no proof around me. And that's the hard thing. And I feel like when you talk about why does a little kid keep trying to walk, but why do most of us just give up? I feel like that we don't, I feel like so many people either have never heard their own gut or haven't heard it in a long time. And then sometimes we hear it and we don't trust ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And instead of putting our own intuition on a pedestal, we put things like other people's opinions or what our partner's telling us to do or our own self-doubt or what the experts are saying or the lack of proof of success around us. And
How do you think we learn to trust ourselves more?
I think that we have to want to. I think we have to make the decision that we need to want to. And that's hard because you know what? The truth is it's way easier to stay in our comfort zone. It's way easier to make the circle around us happy and comfy and not fearful. It's way easy. And I think that chips away at our soul when we do that. I think every person knows, like I think we know deep down inside if we're created for more and we're supposed to give more, if we have more inside of us to give or to serve or to love or to live. I think we all know that deep down inside. And I think that if we don't do something about it, I think it chips away at our soul. And I think we end up literally talking ourselves out of our own truth and literally never becoming the person we're born to be. I know that sounds dramatic, but I think it's true. And I think that I think that's the easy route. So I think the first thing is you have to want to.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to take a lot of courage to overcome your fears and go into that stuff too. I'm curious, the first time you went on QVC, what was that experience like for you? Do you felt like you had, a few years of building confidence under your belt, or were you extremely nervous right before that first experience?
Literally everything was on the line in that moment, and that's what made it hard. So you know how you can like know your values and know your why and know all these things, and you think you're gonna like stick by them and live them, and then all of a sudden they're tested. I think like all of us have had that happen to us, and after 3 years of hearing no, we got one shot, we got a yes, and we got one shot on QVC. It's a crazy story. So I go into it in the book on how it happened and how we finally got the yes and all this stuff. But what it meant though is we had one shot in this 10
If it didn't sell, you're never coming back on.
You're never coming back. And it's live, so there's no script. And QVC is, as you know, but maybe not everyone knows, it's a live television channel to broadcast to 100 million homes, and you have to, you're measured in dollars per minute, and so their airtime, it's not like a store where you walk in and you can see thousands of products. Only one product can be live on the air at that moment. So you're not just competing with beauty brands, you're competing with Apple iPhone and Dyson vacuum and Vitamix, all the stuff to hit a certain sales. So we got one shot and 10 minutes. And it was a consignment deal. So what that meant was we had to manufacture all the product, pay for it, et cetera, get it all shipped in there.
Yeah, they don't buy any of it.
No, not in beauty at the time. And then whatever, and then if it didn't sell, we would take it all back without being paid, go out of business. And at the time we were doing just, as 2 to 3 orders a day on our website. And what I learned was we'd have to sell over 6,000 units of our product in a 10-minute window to hit their sales goal or not come back. And so Paulo and I together, and Paulo, which is why I say his name, applied for 22 SBA loans and got rejected. It was the 23rd one in California, actually, that gave us an SBA loan just to cover the cost of the inventory for this one shot on QVC. So you should never accept a purchase order you can't afford to lose. But at this point, 3 years in, it was like...
It's like make it or break it. You're
make it or break it.
We're going all in, or we're dying on the sword.
Exactly. And so we said yes and did everything. We hired third-party consultants. And this is where everything I believed in was put on the line. And they're awesome, and they help a lot of people, right? So they help people sell on QVC and retail stores.
They gave you a different
amazing
strategy that wasn't what you wanted to do, probably.
Right, exactly. They're
all this is what you need, and you need this perfect model, and they need to be speaking this way, they need to look a certain way.
Because that's what had always been done, and that's what had always worked. And so they wanted the best for me. They were smart and wanted me to win. And they're like, okay, here's what you need to do. Use models with perfect skin, all this. And I would say, okay, but like that's not why I created this. And what if and this was pre-YouTube exploding. So I'm like, what if I go on air and just take my makeup off, like on live TV and show my rosacea, like, and what if I put, I'm gonna put models that all different ages and sizes, skin challenges, skin tones, everything. And they were mortified. Like they're like,
no, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, and
you're gonna lose it all. Yeah.
And I would say, okay, but if I'm sitting at home and I'm watching and I don't see someone that looks like me, how do I know the product is going to work for me? And but it's really hard when your gut is telling you one thing, experts are telling you another. It's like I couldn't try it both ways. So I flew out to QVC a week before our airing, our one shot, and this might sound crazy to you, but I got a rental car. I sat all alone in the QVC parking lot for a week, every day, just like watching the front door of the building, knowing the next time I go in, like I'm either gonna walk out with out of business or with, and I sat there and I prayed and I cried and it felt really heavy, to be honest, because I didn't.
It's a big moment.
A big moment because it was like, okay, I'm not nervous for TV, but it was like it felt like everything was on the line, and I tried to imagine who my customer was, who was watching it, like why am I doing what I'm doing, all these things. I remember at one point channeling Oprah. I was like, okay, I remember this time when Oprah was obsessed with the color purple. She told the story on her show, and she wanted it so bad that it consumed her, and she ran around a track and just saying, I surrender all, and asked God to take it from her because she just couldn't carry it herself. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna try that. So I sat in the car, like literally singing I surrender all and crying. I also was imagining, you might do this, I was imagining like, okay, Olympians, I think that they imagine like what happened. Yeah. And so I was visualizing the sold out sign coming up across the screen. I was, all those things. I was sitting in the car, just doing everything that I could. And I also just had this moment where I imagined this woman sitting at home, and if I was going to be blessed enough for her to turn her TV on for 5 seconds, like what did I want to stand for, right? And I was like, okay, if she's going to give me her precious time, even if she buys nothing, I'd rather her look at the TV and see me showing real women and calling them beautiful and meaning it, because you can't fake authenticity, meaning it. And I'd rather have her for a moment feel like she's seen and like she matters and sell nothing than stand for nothing and sell a shitload of product and hit a sales goal. And so it was this moment where I just kind of knew. But sometimes we know what the right thing is, but it's also the hard thing and it's scary.
It's like being in the wrong relationship and your gut's telling you get out, but everyone's like, oh, but they look great on paper, or
And my parents are happy, or this or that.
Yeah, you're like, but I'm torn.
Yes. I feel like everything comes down to our knowing and trusting it in life. And so many people are like, oh, how'd you sell your business for whatever, $1 billion? Like, oh no, that's not the victory. The victory is if we're trusting ourselves and our knowing and where we're supposed to be on our journey. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the victory. And it's like every time I don't do that, that's when I make big mistakes. And when I look back, and that's when I stayed in wrong relationships. That's when I kept employees on too long. That's when all those things. So I'm walking in the QC building and I go into the studio, and there's cameras like we see right now. I know that the second the on-air light goes on, it's
go time.
Live. Yeah, go time.
Wow.
Live to 100 million homes, and there's this 10-minute clock. And here's what I learned right before, okay? I learned, you're not guaranteed 10 minutes.
Oh, if it's not selling in 5, see ya.
So exactly. So you might be a minute or two in, and if you're not in real time doing well, hitting the goals, it jumps. Like your clock might go from 8 minutes, boom, you're down at 2 minutes, and you're like, and you if you try to sell, nothing sells. You know what I mean? And it's just
if
like
you're forcing it, then people can feel it.
You can feel it, and you cannot fake authenticity. That's the thing. So it was like, okay.
How do you get sales in 2 minutes if they're not seeing sales when you haven't even told the story of the product?
I know, exactly. You have to be so just I know. And so, and I had prepared so hard for this. Like
The consultants taught you how to pitch and how to position and tell the story within a certain time frame and everything.
Yeah, and I literally thought, I walked in there thinking, okay, here's what I'm going to say off the top. Here's how I'm going to do this. And I didn't listen to consultants in terms of models. I'm like, I'm going to show real women all those things. But I'm like, here's how I'm going to, do this demonstration on my wrist, all the stuff I had planned out. And then I did my host meeting a few minutes before the show, and she thanked me for my ideas and said, okay, but here's what we're gonna do. So literally scrapped everything.
So we're not doing that.
Nope. And I had, in that moment, I had to trust her, but I also had to just, like, I know, but they're so good. Oh,
They're pros.
They're such pros. Yeah, they know.
So you had a co-host with you.
Yeah, the QVC host, and then I'm there with the product. Yeah, like the entrepreneur, the founder, and she was amazing and all that. And but at that moment, like I remember the 10-minute clock, and I remember it was like 9:59, 9:58, and I remember like feeling my heart racing.
This is it.
Yeah, and it's so gross, but I remember like sweat. I remember feeling sweat. And you would talk about how much we love Sarah Blakely. I was wearing 2 pairs of Spanx, and I remember feeling the sweat like dripping. I was like, okay, these Spanx are gonna save me because it's not gonna come through my dress. But then I also remember thinking, like, I have to not make this about me or I'm done. It's like, okay, this is about, how do I want to shift culture and beauty? Who is that woman watching? Like, if she's going to bless me with her time, how am I going to show up for her? And I remember this moment where my bare face came up on national TV, and then I remember walking to the models, and I was shaking like a leaf. So I had planned this demonstration.
Just like 100 times in the mirror.
Yes, in
this
the
is the way it's gonna
bathroom
look. I'm gonna wipe this thing off. I'm gonna
Yes.
put this on. I'm gonna smile. Yeah.
Yes, and it was so good in my bathroom mirror. And then I'm trying to do this on national television, and this is my hand, literally. And the host grabs it, and she's like, "Thank you, sugar." And she took over, and we walked to all the models, and then I remember toward the very end of, I think it was like a minute left, and she's like, "The deep shade is sold out," or "The tan shade's almost gone,"
You're
something like that.
Like what?
Yeah, and I was like, and then I remember at the 10-minute mark, the sold out sign came up across the screen, just like I had envisioned it in the car, in the parking lot. The sold out sign came up. I started crying.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and they cut, and I see Paulo my husband, coming running through the double doors at the studio, and I'm like sobbing loose. I'm like, "Real women have spoken." And he's like, "We're not going bankrupt." And it was just like, and I was just like, "Ah." And that one airing turned into 5 that year, and then 101 the next year, and then we did
100?
and we did over 250 live shows a year for
crazy.
8 years. Yeah, so I did over 1,000 live QVC shows myself, but we also built the largest beauty brand in QVC's history, and it is right now. At this moment that you and I are talking, it's right now still largest beauty brand in QVC's history. And I only share that because it was 3 years of them saying, "No, you're not the right fit," all those things, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, like, nobody can tell you you're not the right fit.
Yeah, and you also got to know the timing of, maybe if you'd done it 3 years earlier, you wouldn't have been ready.
Oh, totally.
Maybe if you're pitching it, you would have bombed, and you would have never had another chance. You never would have had another chance, and you would have been done. So sometimes the delayed of people saying no is good for you to figure out, okay, how can I become better? How can I be prepared? How can I sell more? How can I do these other things? So that's what I think we got to think about as well is, how are we going to set ourselves up for something when someone says no?
Yeah, and to not be afraid of it.
Exactly.
I mean, to not be afraid of rejection and not be afraid of doing it, imperfectly, any of that stuff. It's so important. Oh my gosh, if I ever got afraid of it, never was easy, but if I ever got afraid of rejection, I would have been done. Like, done. Would have never hopefully had, I hope I had an impact on the beauty industry. That would have never happened. I would have never built $1 billion business. You know what I mean? I think it's huge. And I think it comes down to this, is like just really trusting your knowing. You know what I mean? Every time somebody hurt me or said no or whatever, I would go back and be like, okay, another expert said no. Like, am I wrong? Is my gut wrong? Right? But every time I would get still and just know. And for me, it's how I've never heard God talk to me, but like I feel, for me, it's faith is part of that. I hear it through my intuition. For other people, it's the universe. Like it's everything. And I just think, you mentioned relationships. I think that we all know if we're in the right relationship. Like
in our gut, we know.
In our gut, we know. And I mean, I don't think I have a single girlfriend in my life, including myself, who hasn't gone through a relationship where he's like sketchy, and you're like, oh, maybe his phone did break for 3 days. Maybe, like, right, it didn't break.
Right.
We all know. And I just think that we start to turn up the volume on all this noise in our life, how busy we are, other people's opinions, what our inner circle says, all the things, and we have the mute button on our own gut, and it goes on for so long that we start to not learn how to hear it. And so, for me, and it's not, and I believe everyone has a knowing, and I believe it's always right. And I think that like learning how to listen to it, how to trust it is a journey. It's a process.
I'm curious about.
Do you do that in life though, like with people, with friendships? Do you feel a knowing?
No, I feel it. Yeah,
you feel it,
it's
right?
usually pretty quick for me. It's an intuition. But I also research people pretty extensively, and I look at everything. I look at things that they don't even think I might be looking at, and I learn a lot about people by doing research. So before I even speak to them, I'll kind of get a gut instinct. And then they really need to show me, whether convince me that I'm right or convincing me that I'm wrong within connecting with them. And sometimes I've been wrong, very few, maybe 2 or 3 times out of thousands of people, where I was like, oh, the things I saw about them, I prejudged them in a way that wasn't accurate. And I took responsibility for that. But most of the time you can get a sense from people, whether you watch a couple videos or just see what they're sharing or how they communicate. So
it's funny, I just get a feeling.
Yeah,
Because
me too.
I've met so many people that are amazing on video. And then I just get a feeling and I'm like, okay, and
yeah. Do I want them in my life that much? Yeah.
Well, and I just think that, listen, I think every single one of us, has miscalculations and misjudgments and makes mistakes and all that. And I don't believe we're our mistakes. I believe we're our intentions, And
Absolutely.
and
We can shift our intentions at any moment.
yeah.
Things I doubt. Before I answer that, I want to make sure I close the loop on Oprah, and then I'll answer that question. What is the greatest advice she has taught you from the first time you met her till now?
So her advice was Maya Angelou's advice, which she shared over and over. She said she's learned this lesson a few times, which is, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time, which is Maya's words. And it's actually something that's so hard to do. I go into in my book about a lot of stuff, from being like the rug being pulled out from underneath me, learning I was adopted in my late 20s by surprise. Like, there's so many things I go into this book on about how to handle when they happen in our personal lives and in relationships and all that.
You didn't know you were adopted until you were in your 20s?
Yeah, until my late 20s. I found out by accident. Yeah, and then I went on a 5-year search of trying to find my birth mom. And so it was like 5 years of thousands of women, calling thousands of women by this name. Yeah, and I go in and I feel like,
Did you ever meet your mom?
I have, and then that's a whole thing. I think you're halfway through the book,
Yes,
right?
yeah, wow.
Yeah, there's some stuff in there, and I share it. 95% of this book is stuff I've never shared before. Personal lessons, professional lessons.
What was the first thing you said to your mom? Your birth mom?
It's a story, Lewis. You have to, the first thing that happens after 5 years of searching for her.
Gosh.
Yeah, after 5 years of searching for her and watching the adoption shows where people go running to each other, like in the wheat fields,
That's not
and
happening.
embrace.
That
and
didn't
I
happen.
Dreamed it didn't happen.
No.
When I finally found her and reached out to her via email, with getting her info finally. It's a long story, so I share how it happened in the book. But
You email her.
I email her, and the day I did, everything disappeared. Her social media, everything was gone.
Shut up. So you followed her. You could see her stuff online, Facebook or
Within
wherever
24
it was.
hours of finding her, I found out
gone.
everything gone.
Like LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever,
Everything.
Twitter.
Yeah.
No way.
And I didn't know
When was
why.
this?
When was
How old were
this?
you?
In my 30s.
30s, wow.
Yeah.
It's like a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so so at the time it felt like she gave me up again.
Oh man.
Yeah, and I talk about that process of, and it's a beautiful story though that's still unfolding right now, and I talk about how we mend relationships in our lives and how we handle things when we feel, because my parents who raised me didn't ever want me to know. And so,
did you feel abandoned by them by never telling you?
A little bit. And I also felt like it was like the rug just got pulled out from underneath me, and I went on this journey of like, who am I?
Well, like living a lie.
Yeah.
They weren't being...
Exactly.
I understand they're trying to protect you or whatever, but it's like eventually you'd find out, right?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, now with 23andMe, it's like, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a total accident. So I talk about that process too of like, how do you handle that when somebody... Like, I love my mom who raised me more than anyone on the planet. And that's who I thought was the closest person to me in my life. I mean, she still is, but what do you do when you feel like someone betrays you? And so it's been a journey. There's so much in this book. That's why I was laughing in the beginning. I'm like, oh, you're halfway through. Okay, get ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock this house and welcome to the stage, Jamie Kern Lima! Jamie Kern Lima!
Every single one of us has had someone tell us we're not enough. Every single one of us has had someone say words to us that hurt.